Hi, this is really exciting to be with you all. Um, I didn't know anything about this and just got an email one day and thought, oh, this looks fun. I'll do it. I love sharing with people. I love connecting with people. And because I'm not traveling right now, like I usually do, I find things like this that are international to be really exciting as a way to connect with people all over the world. So I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm in my studio right now. You can see it behind me. It's a mess. Um, I just rode my bike here from my house. It was a 40-minute bike ride. And yeah, I'm in an area called Dumbo, which is right by the water. So I have a slideshow with rapidly moving slides to show you what I do. I have a very diverse practice that focuses on textiles and fiber, but I do installation and I also make objects and I work in a kind of micro and macro spectrum. So here we go. All right, so this is a needlepoint. Needlepoint is a kind of embroidery that you stitch into, here I have a little mesh, you can see it's like a grid. So that would be an example of micro. This is an image of a project I used to do called Knitting Nation. But in general, I like to say that like in the realm of textiles, I work with fabric and then yarn. So it could be one of those or all three, fabric, yarn, and pattern. So not only do I make things with yarn and fabric, but I also do a lot of drawing and painting. And here's a piece where you can see that the graphic imagery that carries over from those drawings goes right into the textiles. Occasionally I experiment with ready-mades like IKEA bath mats. I make a lot of paintings that are conjoined and kind of painting sculptures so that the pieces are tethered together and can be shown, like hung in a lot of different ways. So then there's kind of experience there of like liquidity, like the material becoming liquid, the stripes liquefying. So something that's very static and rigid, kind of collapsing or melting. And also with these tethered pieces, they're about relationships. Like I like that idea of the interdependent objects. Sometimes I collaborate with furniture designers specifically for my installations. So here's an installation that was at the Tang Museum in upstate New York. I had this space for 2 years and transformed it. So the pieces that you see, I make just as discrete objects, but I also use them to populate these installations that I do from time to time, where I'm given some kind of room in a museum or a gallery and asked to take it over and transform it. And it usually involves some kind of aspect of a social space. So I like to call them lounges because they're usually spaces where people can hang out and be comfortable. So this is an image from an art fair in New York where you can see the different scale of my works. And these pieces that are these graphic and shiny painting-like pieces are made with woven fabrics that I develop with textile mills in Italy and other places. So that's also a really important part of my work that involves travel. You can see the details here of the woven fabrics that I cut away. So I travel to Italy and work with textile mills there. I work with mills that make fabric for fashion and upholstery. You know, they don't really fabricate for artists. And I have relationships with some design companies, kind of design world people that have given me access to these great resources that don't usually fabricate things for artists. So it's really nice to have that be like a unique part of what I do. Here we go back to the the micro, these kind of minuscule little, very, very slow stitched pieces. So I like that duality of the very slow, like analog, stitch by stitch, then working at that end of the spectrum alongside of working with these mills where the machines that weave that fabric are going very, very fast. And I like that kind of to be in both places at once. So these are concurrent bodies of work that sometimes are interconnected. I mean, you know, many of you who are artists know that like all the work's coming from the same person. So even if they're different bodies of work, there's always kind of, you know, there are connections between the work, different sensibilities sometimes. Like here, it's a whole other kind of feeling, you know, this super chunky, voluminous texture of these pieces where I'm using fabric yardage as a kind of giant yarn. So it's a very different thing aesthetically in some ways than the other work, and process wise, but at the end of the day, you know, there's still these connections regardless of the scale, literally connections, you know. Occasionally I work in the queer sector. I'm a queer artist, and do projects and with the LGBTQ community and art world here in New York. There's some great art organizations that I'm involved in here that that's part of what my work kind of deals with sometimes through my community. Like I'm interested in engaging people within my community and my work in different ways. These are drawings that I did with colored pencil, and the prior images you saw were at a museum lobby. And then here is a scarf. So that's something I do too. I work across, if you know, art and design, moving some of my work into applied design objects. I really like that. I find it to be a really rich kind of intersection. And a lot of it for me is kind of thinking about like domestic space, you know, like how the way that people live, like how we live with art and with objects and in environments, with textiles, with furniture. So I'm not an interior designer, but when I'm doing these installations, there's definitely some of that activity going on, like thinking about like, how do I transform this environment into something that's very comfortable for people, but also feels like a very other kind of another world that might also be kind of uncomfortable or kind of stir up different emotions or feel overwhelming in a way that like I liked a little bit to overwhelm the senses. This was at the New Museum in New York, as it was a show called Trigger: Gender as a Tool and a Weapon. And they gave me this room to transform into a kind of space that was a video lounge. So there's work in there that I did many years before. It was kind of a mini retrospective in a way. This is a bookstore in New York City. It's the only LGBTQ bookstore in the city. And I transformed it into this kind of reading room with a portrait exhibition from 100 different queer artists. Many of them are people I know. So I don't consider myself a curator, but I do often bring other people's work into my installations because again, it's like that richness of the objects in conversation. This was a space that I was asked to do that same kind of curatorial idea and installation with Brooklyn queer artists, like a smaller version of the other project I did, which was called Cast of Characters. So here is the work of like 40 different artists, many who I know. Some of them are well known and others are emerging. And I like that too, to kind of have that spectrum of like famous people and people who no one knows and kind of put them on an even playing field. This is an installation in Los Angeles that actually is still kind of sitting there shuttered because of the COVID situation. But here we have wallpaper that was silk screened and shows up in two different forms in these spaces, illuminated with black light. And the imagery in these you can see is a carryover from the other installation. The carpet is the same. The wallpaper is a new build out. And the imagery in this was, it comes from a film called Liquid Sky that was a film I saw when I was a teenager, and it was like a high new wave kind of campy movie that really affected me aesthetically and otherwise. This was from last year in Milan. I participated in the design fair there. There's a huge design week that happens every year in Milan, and I partnered with a textile company called Sunbrella, again, to transform these rooms. But this time it was using all of their materials, and these furry walls are made with this thing called selvage waste. It's a material that comes off of industrial weaving looms and is thrown away. And so I repurpose that material and try to transform it into new things. So again, you see this kind of domestic space, but kind of otherworldliness. And there's usually I bring in video from people, collaborators as well. Fast and Furious. So I think that's all I'll show from the, I'll make sure there's time to chat with you all wherever you are. New Jersey, Amsterdam, California, France, Colorado. Yes, North Pacific. Hi.
This is Dorothy from France. So Liz, you did a fabulous job in, not only is your work really, really interesting, and I'd never seen anything like it, but it's also that you did a great job with the format. I've seen quite a few, and that was really a great way to do it. Thanks.
Hi, this is Anisha from Niwot, Colorado.
Hi.
I am a fiber artist as well, and I really, really love your work. I've done some connection pieces as well. And so I'm just intrigued, and all of a sudden I'm suddenly inspired and making little notes and pictures. And so thank you so much. I loved your work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's Martine talking here from Amsterdam. No, I really appreciate this overwhelming quality of your work. I think do you see it also as very related to queer identity, or it's just because it's you and that's it?
I mean, yes. Yeah. I think in this kind of, like there's something about pleasure and escapism and abundance and being like highly decorative, which is something like I'm not afraid of the word decorative. And, you know, there's a whole, like, there's a real stigma around that. It's like a thing that, you know, like anti-feminist, anti-queer, you know, this idea of like the highly decorative, like overwhelming, encrusted environment or thing that maybe, or beauty, you know, like I think there's something about queerness in like fully embracing that, it related to camp and pleasure. But it's not a conscious thing, you know, it's not like, I think it's just inherently who I am. Like, so, you know, it just comes out, like whatever's coming out of you, you don't have to like, I mean, I feel intentional about form and things like that. And am definitely like thinking about things, but a lot of it is deeply intuitive and it always has been.
I also found, yeah, you have an incredible production in quantity. How can you do so much in such a short time? That's also overwhelming.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you noticed the dates on some of those, but they weren't all done in the past 5 years. There's things that go back farther than that. I mean, I do work a lot. I tend to be like a prolific person because it's what I like to do most. And I've kind of rearranged my life and have made some big compromises in order to work on my work and projects full time. So there's that, you know, like I'm devoted to it. But also, when I do these big projects, I usually hire people to help me. Some of the installation projects, whether they have a big budget or not, I know that my output is very limited if I work alone. Like actually right now, I'm in a very weird place, as you know, everybody kind of is. Like I had to let go of my 3 amazing helpers in mid-March, like in the middle of some big projects that got postponed. And I had a studio manager part-time and then 2 part-time assistants who were helping me do all these projects. And you know, now I'm working by myself, and in certain ways I really like that. I like the solitude. I like not having to delegate, but everything moves very slowly. So, and if you're working in a medium that's, you know, labor intensive and involves a lot of outsourcing, there's a limit to how much one can do in a day. So, but you know, the way that people work these days, this kind of gig economy where there's so many freelancers. I mean, if we weren't in a pandemic, I would say in general, like whenever I have big projects, I hire more people and then the projects go away for a moment and then the people go away, you know, like there's so many people working in New York right now who, like, it benefits me and it benefits them to kind of have that freelance relationship. Great to connect with you all. Goodbye.